scriptural reading this morning is from a book called Anam Cara by John O'Donohue. It's a book of Celtic wisdom. If you find that your heart has hardened, one of the gifts that you should give yourself is the gift of the inner wellspring. You should invite this inner fountain to free itself. You can work on yourself in order to unsilt this, so that gradually the nourishing waters begin in a lovely osmosis to infuse and pervade the hardened clay of your heart. Where before there was hard, bleak, unyielding, dead ground, now there is growth, color, enrichment, and life flowing from the lovely wellspring of love.
Our reading today is from Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8. Blessed are those who put their trust in God with God for their hope. They are like a tree planted by the river that thrusts its roots toward the stream. When the heat comes, it feels no heat. Its leaves stay green. It is untroubled in the year of drought and never ceases to bear fruit.
Would you pray with me? Ancient One, we've been a little distracted this morning with technical issues and crazy wind blowing around here. Help us to take a deep breath and to ground ourselves once more in you, your Spirit. May you flow through us. And I invite you, God, to flow through me, that I might be a conduit this morning, that I might get out of my own way. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of each of our hearts, be filled with your grace and your wisdom. Wow, it sure is whistling out there, isn't it? Cool. So, you all know that Wisconsin's in the middle of a drought, right? I was reading about it. I didn't realize quite how bad it was. 2/3 of the state is in a moderate level drought. But Racine and Kenosha are considered to be in a severe drought. This winter alone, we are 16 inches short of the average snowfall. That's a lot. It's your fault? How on earth did you do that, Jim?
Because I ordered a big snowblower.
You ordered a big snowblower. That'll do it. Nobody buy any more snowblowers or umbrellas. So, the concept of a drought. I look around and it doesn't really feel like, it doesn't really look like a drought, but we are in the middle of winter. It's hard to see things. But when you think of a drought, what does it look like to you? Images. A desert, dry, arid. What else? Desolate. Barren. Cracked earth. Yeah, that's a good image. What was it? Shriveled leaves or wilted leaves that are kind of getting all dry and limp. Dust bowl. Dust blowing. Yeah. Tumbleweeds. We don't have any of those around here, but that's kind of what you picture, isn't it? Now we're with the roadrunner and the coyote and the tumbleweeds. So like I was saying to the kids, and this concept of water needed for, my flowers and how water is also needed for us, I think the concept of a drought also applies to us. Have you ever felt like you were in the midst of your own spiritual drought? What did that feel like? lonely, empty,
Confusing.
doubt, confusing. If you have all the answers, Barb, you let me know, because what else? What does a spiritual drought feel like? Does it echo some of the other descriptions? Barren. Do you feel dry? Do you feel like limp? The leaves on the tree that aren't growing?
Scary.
Scary, okay. Yeah, this concept of a spiritual drought is, I think it's important to recognize because I don't think we know how to name it very well. I look around right now and I see a number of people that I know, and they're not the same vibrant, energetic, optimistic, engaged people that I'm used to encountering. And I wonder to myself if they're struggling with a spiritual drought. You know, and it's not anybody's fault when that happens. Life has its ebbs and flows. Jerry, we prayed for you. Welcome back. You're welcome. Life has its ebbs and flows. And sometimes we're green and we're growing and life is good and vibrant and it's a wonderful summer with lots of moisture. And other times we're overwhelmed and we're exhausted and we're struggling and we're in the midst of crisis. Or like you said, we're confused and we're not, life just isn't coming together and we're burning the candle at both ends. And we end up in this spiritual drought where we're lackluster and we're dragging our feet to get through the days. So, I'm curious. On a scale of 1 to 10, how green are you? So, if I give you 10 is up here, where I'm 100% green and I'm growing and this is wonderful. Your arm is straight up in the air. Yeah, I'm thinking 0 is you don't move and you're dead, so you all gotta move. But if 1 is I don't have much left in me, and you raise your hand from 1 to 10, would you give me a show of hands as to where you feel you are? You folks on Zoom can do this too. Okay, so most of us are pretty good, and either some of you are dead or you don't want to play my game. And that's okay. Nobody has to play. Awareness of that is an important piece. To be aware of how green you feel and what you need if you're starting to get too dry and too brittle and too barren and too empty and alone. What do you need to do to fill becomes a question. Jeremiah gives us this beautiful imagery of, says those who trust in God sink their roots, are like trees that sink their roots into the stream and they're connected to this ever-flowing river of life that fills them. Trust is a really interesting word, and trust in God is a really interesting concept. Because I'm not suggesting that you all figure there's an old white guy in the sky who's just going to take care of whatever you need to have taken care of. Trusting in God is like trusting in the river to hold you up if you'll relax enough into it to float, right? Now, I still will confess that I don't float well, but that's probably half my fault. We don't float well in the river of God if we're trying to control, if we're trying to do it ourselves. Trusting in God is understanding that there is a supportive presence that is there to fill us and nourish us like the water for my carnations right now. But we forget. We get preoccupied and forget. I've been in the middle of droughts, spiritual droughts, where I've been, too exhausted and unmotivated and, maybe sad and grieving or something to do much of anything. And I forget that there's a river of life available to me because I get too caught up in distractions to remember to take time to sink my roots in. Sometimes that happens spontaneously, and we have those moments where it's like, oh yeah, I remember God's here, and this is wonderful. But more often than not, we have to be deliberate about seeking that presence, about seeking that nourishment. And then for me, it means literally stopping and shutting my mind off. How many of us are good at shutting our mind off? Yeah, like none of us. I think it was a flaw in the design somewhere. We should have been able to stop better and stop thinking. Needed a little switch. I need to go to sleep. I need to connect to God. There should have been something. But that's what we need to focus on doing. To reconnect to that beautiful river. So has anybody read Robin Wall Kimmerer? She's a botanist and she's a poet. She wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which is just a beautiful, beautiful book. And she talks about the hyphoric flow. Anybody ever heard of this? I've never heard of this. There's a thing called the hyphoric flow that is under our rivers and streams. It's an invisible to the eye. It's a literal, river under our rivers, under our stream beds, where the soil and the rocks and the trees are intermixed with the ground. It's not even groundwater because maybe it is groundwater. It's not like the underground water that we get our wells from. But she talks about the sustenance that brings to our trees and our plants and how we can't see it, but it's there. And she talks about the intimacy between the water and the trees and the soil. I'm thinking, what a beautiful image. What if we could think of our own intimacy with the universe, with the divine, and that river that flows underneath and through all things. But we forget. We don't know how to name it. We don't know how to find it. So, what fills you? What fills you and what stops you from tapping into that hyphoric flow, that invisible river of God? Is it all like me? You're just too distracted to think about it? Your brain's going too much? Or do you stop on a regular basis? Are you much better at this than I am? No. Do we just get too busy? I don't have time for that. I'll take care of it. I'll do it on my own. Clarice?
I give my sap away.
You give your what?
I give myself away.
You give yourself away.
Yeah.
So you're pouring out, but you're not filling up. The Taoists talk about how water is the symbol of the energetic, vibrant flow of life that goes through us. And they talk about how you can't just fill up, but you have to pour out. I have a wonderful quote here somewhere. So Taoist Chang Tzu writes this: to be poured into without becoming full, and to pour out without becoming empty. That's the whole concept. It's like the water cycle. You learn the water cycle in school. It goes up into the clouds and it rains, it goes down, it comes up in the plants, or whatever. It's the water cycle, and it evaporates and it goes around. We need the same cycle. We need to fill up and pour out, and fill up and pour out. My prayer every Sunday morning is that I won't just pour out of my own head, but that I'm filling up with the river of life and pouring out to you, that I'm a conduit as opposed to a pitcher. And so to tap into that. So what is it that fills you? What What do you do that makes you come away with and you feel like you have more energy, you have more life, you have more to give? Clarice, what would fill you instead of just pouring out and giving?
Well, music or having a conversation with someone that's fulfilling.
So a conversation with the right person, because there's some people that'll just take more of what you got. Conversation or listening to music. What else? What fills you up?
Sunshine and blue sky.
Sunshine and blue sky. Do you go out in it? Because it'll fill you more if you go out into it and you breathe the fresh air and you feel the wind in your hair and the sun on your face, even if it's cold. What else fills you up?
Doing something creative.
Doing something creative. Yeah. What else? Grandchildren. Your grandchildren filled you up, Sue. You talked about it. Goats. Baby goats. Playing, fill you up. Jan.
New experiences like traveling to somewhere different.
Sure. New experiences. Traveling. Dogs. Yeah. Dogs and cats are like the original fillers. They have all that love to give. So I was reading a book last night by Anne Lamott. I think it's her latest book. It's her book on hope. And she tells a story about a woman named Kelly. Kelly was a vibrant, energetic, brilliant woman who was an alcoholic. She was 100 pounds overweight and living in her car when she finally got sober and started going to AA meetings. And she slowly turned her life around going to those meetings. She lost weight. She became a realtor. She became a prestigious realtor. She got married. She had a beautiful house. 10 years of going to meetings and getting her life on track and having everything that she could have wanted. And she and Anne Lamott were close friends, and they talked all the time, apparently over the show Survivor mostly. But then one day they sat down to lunch together, and Kelly said, I got two things to tell you. I'm getting a divorce, and I'm not going to meetings anymore. She said, I just don't buy that God stuff. There's too much God stuff, and I don't believe in any of that. And Anne said, well, but you can pick your higher power. It can be anything you want it to be. It can be the mountains, it can be the ocean, it can be your dog, it can be baby goats, it can be whatever your higher power is. You just need to know you need something other than yourself to get through this. And she pretty much looked at her and went, no, mountains are just mountains, and dogs are just dogs, and goats are just goats. There is nothing else. I'm not going anymore. Well, she stayed sober for a while, but she started to gain weight. And one of the things, apparently she lost a lot in the divorce. The word was fleeced. She was fleeced in the divorce. She did get to keep the dog. And she loved her dog. They found a new apartment. She struggled, but she was hanging in there. And then her dog died. And her world fell out from under her. And she started drinking again. And within the first week, she drank so much that she ended up in the hospital. She went into a program, she went into treatment, she went back to AA. She started getting better. She was in AA for all of 3 months, and then she dropped out again. Can't do that God thing. I don't believe it. It's infantilizing. And there was nothing that Anne Lamott could say to her that would change her mind. She still stayed in contact on a regular basis, but Kelly went downhill. She gained weight. Then she met a neighbor upstairs. And her comment was, this woman's just like us. She's brilliant, she's funny, and so she'd have dinner up there every night, she'd tell Anne. We have dinner, we have cocktails, we watch TV, we laugh. And then together they killed themselves. Someone who was in a drought. And they found that source that filled them. Going to those meetings and having that support of one another. Something that nourished them, that kept them afloat. That maybe kept them from being lonely and empty. And yet she couldn't accept it. Even if it, didn't have to be named that God thing or whatever. We don't have to name it a God thing. There is an energy in this world that sustains and supports us if we remember to tap into it. And she let go of the help she needed to stay afloat. I want to read you something by Mark Nepo. Because I find this to be a hard sermon to give because this is so mystical, so intangible and ineffable to try and explain. And I'm hoping that you felt some of these things so that you know what I'm trying to say. But he says this. He said, just last week in a small place, I was listening to a folk singer when part of his song opened something and I realized I have never been happier. Have never been more in love, never closer to the fragile pulse of things. But the opening didn't stop there. It drew me in until, like leaning over the edge of a cliff, the feeling took me down to the beginning. And I realized that loving others is where it began. It comes and goes, the sense of mystery that surrounds us. Just now, this morning over coffee, it's raining gently. And the birds are beginning to sing, our dog curled in my space. For some reason, I've fallen again into the quiet basin of my heart where all loves mix. The light rain at the window is saying, don't think too hard. Just swim. It's testimony like that reminds me of that inner wellspring that John O'Donohue talked about, that is available to all of us, that he tapped into in those few precious moments that we can all tap into. So I want to do an exercise. I want to close with an exercise with you this morning. A very short guided meditation. So if you would humor me and place your feet flat on the ground. Your feet right now are the roots connected to the ground of our being, through which the energy of life flows up. Open your hands in a stance of receiving. And take a deep breath. You can close your eyes or you can focus on a certain point in the room if that's easier for you. But take a deep breath. And release it. Take 2 more deep breaths. And feel the tension drain out through your body. And now I want you to imagine the river of life flowing beneath your feet. It's a nourishing stream of belonging, ease, peace, and delight. I feel the refreshing waters of that river. It's letting them flow up to your toes and up into your feet. Feel it gradually moving up into your body, rejuvenating, enlivening, quenching. Feel the river flowing up through your legs and your back, your torso. filling your shoulders, your arms, your neck, and your head. Feel the relief of this wetness quench the dryness in you. Fill the emptiness in you. Rejuvenate you. Feel your brown, brittle parts begin to green up, even a little bit. Now express gratitude for the sustenance you've received. And open your eyes once more. You can do that on your own anytime, and you can spend as much time with your feet soaking in that stream as you want. I do it sometimes when I'm completely exhausted. I just stop for 15 minutes and I picture that energy, that river coming up through me. It doesn't always fix everything, but I feel better and more able to meet the world after doing that. So I offer it to you today as a spiritual exercise, as a reminder that we are not alone, that there is an energy, a river, a life that's available to us, always an inner wellspring for us to draw sustenance and nourishment from. Amen.